Ever wonder how medieval peasants survived the kind of winter that made your toes write poetry about frostbite? No kings, no castles, just mud, misery, and the noble art of sleeping beside a slightly judgmental pig. Welcome to the Haystack Chronicles, a chillingly boring tale of warmth, wool, and borderline rodent pillow technology. Grab your blanket, light a candle, and prepare to learn how the forgotten folk of feudal frost turned frostbite into folklore. Let's get uncomfortably cozy in the medieval village of Slumberthorpe, a place so quiet even the mice wore slippers. The first frost wasn't tea, marked by falling snow, but by a collective grunt. Not a grunt of surprise, but one of ancient resignation. Winter was coming, and the peasants knew it. Not from calendars, which were considered sorcery, but from the way the chickens began sleeping indoors and the cat mysteriously vanished for 4 months, as the chill began curling around cob walls and creeping beneath straw roofs. Preparations commenced not with fanfare, but with the Great Blanket Migration. Contrary to popular belief, medieval peasants didn't own blankets. They earned them often by marrying into fabric-rich families or surviving a particularly judgmental knitting grandmother. The finest blanket in Slumberthorpe was a relic known as the Patchfather, a 7-layered masterpiece woven from discarded cloaks, goat hair, and 6 generations of disappointment. Once the cold settled, blankets were redistributed through a system called plantocracy, where elders chose who got the warmest one based on complex criteria: number of surviving toes, volume of nightly complaints, and cabbage loyalty. Layering as philosophy dressing for winter was not merely functional, it was existential. Children were often layered in so many tunics they forgot their names. One legendary lad, Tim the thickly draped, once wore 14 garments and had to be rolled 2 meals. Layering was strategic. Wool closest to the skin, followed by nettle-resistant linen, and topped with something vaguely waterproof. When asked if layering actually kept them warm, peasants often replied, "No, but it makes the cold easier to blame." Heating the hut. Fireless alchemy. Starting a fire wasn't simple. First, wood had to be acquired, often via suspicious trades with neighboring villages or strategic barking at trees. The average peasant home lacked chimneys, so fire was placed wherever seemed least flammable, usually near the cow. Fuel ranged from dry brambles to resentful poetry scrolls. Once lit, the fire was treated like royalty, fed crumbs, sung to, occasionally threatened with extinction if it didn't behave. The smokier the room, the warmer the heart, or at least the cough. Meals of warmth and suffering. Food during winter was more about optimism than nutrition. The quintessential dish was toasty gruel, a beige slurry served in wooden bowls and eaten with spoons made from slightly curved twigs. Herbs were banned, as they were considered elite. Warmth was achieved by eating near each other and pretending the steam off someone's forehead counted as heating. Desert, roasted regret, a dish made by talking about summer and weeping quietly into barley. Sleeping techniques that defied logic. Bedtime in medieval winter required a tactical approach. Entire families slept in one bed, not from love, but to pool body heat and defend against rats with vendettas. Sleeping positions were arranged based on foot hygiene and snoring frequency. Some peasants slept with livestock for warmth. It was not uncommon to see a boy snuggled between 2 sheep, whispering bedtime tales about surviving last year's blizzard with only a spoon and a wildly optimistic prayer. Pillows. Those were made from disappointment. Night rituals. From whispers to wool songs, each night ended with what scholars now call the wool chant. A hymn sung softly to the blankets. "O Patchfather, shield us from the snows, hide our toes, and silence the crows. Let no frost enter this peasant pile, and keep us warm, at least for a while." After the chant, villagers would blow out their candles, which reluctantly dimmed after making passive-aggressive remarks. Then silence, and in silence, survival. The houses of medieval peasants were not built to keep the cold out. They were built to confuse it. Their structural philosophy: if it creaks and leaks, it must be doing something. Thus, the hay-stuffed hut became both fortress and folly. Slumberthorpe's cottages were shaped like mildly panicked pancakes, low, wide, and eternally leaning. Roofs sagged like old bread, and every window was a suggestion. Still, within these frost-kissed structures, entire families survived winters with strategies that would make modern insulation weak. Walls with personality. Peasant walls weren't just cold, they were moody. Made of cob, Each wall had its own temperament. Some groaned at sunset, others hoarded frost in corners like spiteful squirrels. One famous hut, Muddle Thatch Manor, was known for whispering secrets if the temperature dropped below misery. Villagers believed the wall held the soul of a former landlord who hated socks and loved eavesdropping. To fight drafts, peasants stuffed every crevice with hay. Not fresh hay, but well-travelled hay. This hay often had prior jobs: pillow filler, goat snack, marital gift. Once retired to the walls, it served nobly, absorbing cold, gossip, and flea politics. The hay economy. Hay wasn't just stuffing, it was currency, bed filler, snack, and apology. Villagers traded hay like stockbrokers, analyzing fluff density and sneeze probability. Rich folk had triple-puffed winter hay imported from the slightly less cursed village down the road. Poorer folks relied on emotional hay, straw that had once witnessed heartbreak and funerals, believed to bring warmth through poetic sorrow. Some daring peasants experimented with layering hay vertically, creating the proto-hay bunk bed. This often collapsed, but symbolized upward thinking. Rotate livestock weekly to avoid favoritism-induced frost rebellion. If the cow sneezes near the fire, everyone reevaluates their life choices. Furniture with attitude. Furniture inside these huts wasn't so much designed as resigned. Chairs were often three-legged and none matched. Tables bowed humbly, as if embarrassed to exist. The beds are the beds. Folk tales warned of Winter Sprig, a frost spirit who judged poorly constructed homes by licking their doorframes. To appease him, villagers left out tiny offerings, onion peels, poorly written poems, or drawings of warmer homes. If the offering froze overnight, it meant Winter Sprig accepted their apology. If it stayed warm, someone was a liar. Some households hired cold whisperers, local eccentrics, who talked to walls and blessed hay. They charged in turnip. Sleep rituals of the haybound every night. The ritual began: shake the hay mattress, apologize to whatever stirred, blow warmth into hands, curse fingers for lack of ambition, snuggle into the hay and whisper, "Don't betray me tonight." Sleep came slowly, often after debating whether or not you heard a rat propose marriage beneath the bed. Dreams were foggy, filled with dancing bread and warm soup that refused to be caught. In the freezing embrace of winter, medieval peasants faced an essential question: how many living beings can I sleep beside before someone calls this a festival? The answer, in slumber thought, was always not enough. When the cold reached conspiratorial levels, sneaking into bones and whispering, "You chose this life," peasants did what any heat-hungry soul would do. They gathered, they huddled, and they stacked. Sleep wasn't an individual activity. It was a strategic formation. The cozy human grid. Each household developed its own sleep geometry. The classic formation was the starfish sandwich: 2 adults facing outward, 3 children sprawled like bread slices, and a chicken dead center for emotional support. Other arrangements included the foot triangle: 3 people aligned toe-to-toe for friction-based warmth; the reverse burrito: 1 person in the middle, wrapped by siblings, livestock, and a boiled turnip for structure; the echo squeeze: all participants leaned inward. Heat was preserved, so were secrets. Shifts occurred nightly. The designated center warmer often changed, determined by a wheel made of bones and guilt. Livestock inclusion protocols. Sleeping with animals was common but not casual. It was governed by the warmth accord, a code passed down orally, and occasionally tattooed on goats. Key rules: only animals with proven body heat could join the pile. No snoring pigs. Sheep must commit to emotional intimacy if placed near the heart zone. One story tells of Gertha the Cold, a peasant who tamed a goose to lie across her chest nightly. The goose later wrote poetry about the experience, though translation remains controversial. Peasant foot hierarchies. Feet were both weapons and blessings. Warm feet could transform a sleeping arrangement into nirvana. Cold feet could trigger revolts. Peasants ranked feet by temperature, consistency, callus, hospitality, sock drama, history. Each night, they held a foot council where toes were assessed and assigned positions. A toe nicknamed Old Ember once led a 2-week warmth alliance. Conflicts were frequent. Some feet betrayed others by venturing outside the hay zone, seeking forbidden air. This led to the infamous night of the Frosty Soul, when 3 villagers woke up demanding foot divorce. Blanket politics and sharing etiquette with limited resources. Blanket usage required diplomacy. Blankets were not shared equally. They were negotiated. Common phrases heard before bed. I'll trade you 6 minutes of blanket for 3 snore-free hours. You can have the itchy end if I get the one that smells like soup. Don't you dare berate yourself again, Edward. One enterprising family invented a blanket coin, small wool patches used for barter. The system collapsed after inflation led to someone claiming ownership of 3 imaginary blankets and 1 ghost. Lullabies of the huddle to ease the nightly transition into heat-based survival. Villagers sang lullabies designed to lull both humans and livestock. Popular titles included Rockabye Turnip, Snore Like the Cows, Dual Dreams and Toe Regrets. These lullabies were slow, droning, and rhymed poorly, but they kept the cold at bay through sheer emotional confusion. The legend of the sleepwalker who warmed us all among these peasants. One figure became myth. Barn, the wandering blanket. A sleepwalker who roamed the village, draping warmth upon the coldest sleepers. No one saw his face. Some said he was made of hay. Others claimed he was just really committed to friendship. Every winter, peasants left out an offering for Barn. Half a cabbage, a whispered thank you, and 1 sock. As darkness settled over Slumber Thorpe like a soggy pancake, peasants turned not to science, but to the ancient art of ritualized warmth, begging. The cold was not merely endured, it was bartered with, bribed, and occasionally mocked through ceremonies best described as emotionally woolly. At the center of these traditions, cows, sturdy, sentient radiators with complex religious significance and a deep appreciation for silence. The sacred cow of comfort. Each village had its winter cow, a creature of warmth and unwarranted wisdom known as the moot. This bovine wasn't just livestock. It was a vessel for heat, dreams, and mildly inaccurate weather predictions. Before sleep, villagers gathered near Musa to whisper their thermal hopes. May my blanket remember its purpose. Grant me a night free of toe frost. Let the hay not stab me with judgment. Musa never responded, but her siddhis were considered prophetic. Incantations, charms, and cozy curses. Magic, in peasant sleep culture, was less spells and more passive-aggressive hopes with flair. Every household had its warmth speaker, someone tasked with muttering nightly incantations over the hearth. Popular incantations included Buy bramble and soot, keep the chill from my foot. Through cabbage prayer and rat counsel, may this blanket become bold. If frost shall touch me, let it be charms were hung from beams, socks stuffed with hay, pig-shaped twigs, and onions carved into suspicious faces. Their effectiveness was debated, especially after one charm attracted a bat with tax collection tendencies. Peasant prophets and bedside oracles. Sleep rituals sometimes required consultation with the blanket seer, a villager who claimed to see future warmth patterns in pillow crumbs. She often declared things like, "Tonight you shall dream of soup and betrayal. Beware the draught coming from your cousin's feet. Your left sock is lying to you." Some villagers took these predictions seriously. Others blamed them for bad dreams involving soup that turned into goats. Ritual objects, candles, spoons, and other holy instruments. Peasant warmth rituals called for sacred tools. The candle of acceptance, lit then immediately questioned for its commitment. The spoon of retention, held during chanting, occasionally licked for dramatic emphasis. The blanket bell, not a bell, just a rock that sounded like one when struck by hope. Objects were passed from sleeper to sleeper, blessed by breath, and sometimes sneezed on for good luck. Hygiene wasn't part of the ritual. Hygiene hadn't RSV, animal role play, the bovine oracle games. One winter, villagers began a tradition called moo channeling, where participants dressed as cows and mooed prophetic phrases in exchange for warmth rations. The cow oracle would proclaim, "He who sleeps north shall lose his sock, a goat shall sneeze, and the warmth shall flee. Thou must not burp near the hay pile." The ritual ended when a real cow joined and outmowed everyone, becoming honorary mayor of Slumberthorpe for 2 weeks. Midnight offerings and the blanket altar in desperate moments. Peasants made offering piles at the foot of their beds, bits of turnip, a piece of bark shaped like courage, and failed poems about warmth. These were placed atop the blanket altar. If the frost didn't bite that night, the altar was praised. If it did, the stool was cursed and renamed Traitor Surface. Among Slumberthorpe's many mysteries, including the cow who recited bedtime poetry and the goat who ran the local whisper economy, none stirred more drama than the invention of the mud sock, heralded by peasants as the future of foot warmth. It was a movement born from desperation and mild hallucination. The story begins with a single complaint. "My toes have become ice philosophers." Edric the chronically chilled origins of socklessness peasants, contrary to modern myths, rarely wore socks in winter. Footwear was rudimentary, mostly leather wrappings, occasionally tree bark, and in one instance, soup. Socks were luxury items, spoken about in fireside myths, often confused with dragons and joy. To combat toe chill, early attempts included wrapping feet in old hay love letters, binding toes with dried cabbage, sleeping with feet directly in bread dough. The mud sock revolution then came. Thistle, a peasant with only 2 hobbies, mud and questions. One night, while lamenting his frostbitten pinky toe, he plunged his feet into warm mud and wrapped them in goat cloth. The warmth lasted 4.5 minutes, enough to spark a revolution. Soon, mud socks were the rage. Design 1. Mud, straw lining, pig-size sealant. Design 2. Double layer with emotional hay. Design 3. Luxury edition with more sequin. Peasants formed the guild of Sangish Hosiery and held nightly competitions for best mud sock aesthetic. One notable entry featured a toe hood and motivational etchings. The sock trials, not everyone welcomed mud socks. Critics formed a counter-movement, dry foot loyalists who believed mud carried curses and mild sarcasm. They staged protests by throwing turnips and reciting haikus about dry toes. In response, the guild launched the sock trials, where foot warmth was scientifically tested. Feet were inserted into rival sock types. Frost was summoned via goat sneeze. Warmth endurance was measured via toe poetry output. Mud socks won, but only because all other socks burst into flames. Decline and tragedy. The downfall began with the Great Slide, a winter where mud froze mid-step, turning villagers into skating. A peasant named Belmer slipped into a rut and declared, "No sock shall bind me again." More sequins began to mold. Goats refused to endorse the product. The guild disbanded amid scandal when one member was caught smuggling warmth from a chimney. Mud socks were banned. Peasants returned to cabbage wrap and spiritual denial. Aftermath. The Lost Toe Collection. Toes lost during the sock experiments were honored annually during the Festival of Forgotten, where villagers danced barefoot on warm stones and whispered names like Lil Frosty and Lefty the Brave. A shrine was built. Offerings included soup steam, wool crumbs, and weeping. How peasants practiced the ancient craft of not quite cooking themselves in slumber. Thorpe's wintry grasp. Warmth was a philosophy, equal parts dirt, illusion, and highly suspicious fire placement. Most peasants couldn't afford a chimney, and those who did were often ostracized for architectural arrogance. Instead, fires burned shyly in corners, fed by what ale didn't scream when ignited. Charcoal became the village's most beloved villain, smoky, temperamental, and endlessly judgmental. The art of the smokeless smoke. Peasants aspired to create fires that warmed without suffocating, a goal rarely achieved. Rooms filled with fog that doubled as breakfast seasoning. Eye-stinging smoke clouds were common, though some claimed they were haunted by ancestors who preferred properly vented heat to survive these ghostly gases. Villagers invented smoke blink language, a form of communication via rapid eyelid flinching. Soot sunglasses, charcoal rings worn around eyes for fashion and despair. The smoke blame ritual, where elders pointed at random children and yelled you breathed wrong. Chimneyless engineering, controlled chaos, Why no chimneys? Mostly superstition. Peasants feared cold spirits crawling down at night, flying turnips getting stuck, unexpected taxes on vertical ambition. Instead, homes relied on strategic draft placement. Windows were cracked slightly to let smoke out, and sometimes let goats in. Walls were rearranged based on whim and hope. One family installed a series of breathing holes, which became nesting sites for literate pigeons. Building the fire, materials, mishaps, and mood. Lighting a fire was a theatrical event. Ingredients varied: twigs with trauma, moss soaked in bedtime regrets, charcoal blessed by the local tosia. Starter bundles were arranged with cryptic layering patterns. One popular design was the warming spiral, believed to channel ancestral warmth. Another was the toe triangle, preferred by peasants with only left feet. Fire was lit using flint, spark stones, or by glaring at wood until it burst into flames from discomfort. Hand care in the age of heat judgment. The colder the fire, the chappier the hands. Peasants suffered split skin, blistering fingers, and one notorious thumb rebellion. Remedies included boar-fat bomb applied while weeping, soot, massage therapy, which never worked, gloves of disappointment, fingerless mitts made from failed promises. Some villagers painted warmth symbols on their palms. Others stole warmth directly from livestock by petting them dramatically. Cooking or conjuring. Peasant cooking merged with warmth techniques in a chaotic soup of invention. Stews doubled as heating mist. Bread was baked on slanted walls. Charcoal was seasoned with old songs and lukewarm ambition. One family cooked dinner entirely through dance, generating enough foot friction to toast 6 turnips and 1 tragic pie. Fire spirits and emotional ash. Peasants believed fire had personality. Many named theirs: Basella, slow to burn, quick to judge; Serembalot, noble, flickered dramatically. The smoke betrayer, too real. To honor their flames, peasants sang, "O fire dear, our soulful queen, warm our toes and pots unseen. Forgive the wood, it meant no lie, and eat our soup before we die." If the fire spat, villagers considered it a critique and moved slightly to the left. How peasants seasoned suffering with hope as the frost crept into every cupboard and the cows began issuing passive. The peasants of Slumberthorpe turned their attention to nourishment, or the creative simulation thereof. Winter meals were less about sustenance and more about storytelling. With nothing but turnips, crusts, and a prayer, the village embarked on a seasonal culinary drama known as TRA, Interpretive Edition. Ingredient roulette. What's edible? What's emotional? The average winter pantry contained 1½ turnips, a spoonful of oat dust, dried herbaceous mystery known only as bitter leaf, memories of last year's cabbage. Protein was achieved via friendly rats who stopped by to judge, mushrooms that spoke in riddles, dreams of roasted goose that haunted the fireplace. Meals were made exciting by pretending something exotic was involved. Example: tonight's stew features Eastern spice, the art of boiled optimism. Everything was boiled: roots, bread, crusts, hopes. Sometimes they boiled the soup pot itself. This method was inefficient, but the rising steam was considered therapeutic and often captured in jars to sniff during bedtime. Cooking styles included slump stew, leftovers from leftovers, depression broth, mostly tears, occasionally flavor, boiled air pie, served on special occasions when nothing was left and imagination was strongest. Peasants described flavors using feelings. This stew tastes like abandonment with a hint of Tuesday. Imaginary feasts and spectral recipes when food ran out. Villagers held mind banquets, where everyone gathered around an empty table and described dinner in vivid detail. These feasts required 1. Imagination, for exaggerated hand gestures, willingness to sob theatrically while chewing nothing. Popular imaginary dishes: roast unicorn with sorrow glaze, triple buttered optimism rolls, soup with floating kisses from ghosts of vegetables past. Children were praised for creativity. One lad claimed to taste 47 herbs in a bowl filled with haywater. Butter politics. If butter existed, even a whisper of it, it caused diplomatic breakdowns. One year, the Great Butter Incident erupted when old Marla claimed she saw a gleam of gloss on the stew. Chaos followed. Accusations of butter hoarding. One duel fought using frozen bread. Butter banned. Briefly worshipped. then eaten via ritual licking. This led to Unbuttered Fortnight, during which villagers reenacted happiness with outspreadable joy. Cutlery, etiquette, and the spoon hierarchy dining tools were scarce. Most meals were eaten with the family spoon, shared by 12 relatives and one confused goat, the sad fork, 3 times, none aligned, the honored ladle, used only for guests, and soup deemed emotionally stable. Etiquette included whispering thanks to the meal before inhaling it, apologizing for chewing too loudly, praising the chef even if the chef was despair. If someone dropped the spoon, they were expected to give a speech about humility. Food as theater to maintain morale. Meals became performances. Villagers sang to their soup, gave potatoes backstories, hosted Chopped, but with feelings. One duo performed a tragic love story between 2 onions who could never stew together. The play won 3 turnips and a fond sniff from the mayor's pig. When peasant pain became myth and toes became martyrs, winter didn't just bite, it judged. In Slumberthorpe, where frost crept like gossip and snowflakes felt passive-aggressive, every peasant wore scars of the season. But some wounds transcended pain and became legend. Thus was born the tale of Surtot the Lost, a frostbitten phalange turned folk hero, whose journey from foot to folklore became the most retold story beneath scratchy blankets and judgmental candlelight. The incident: 1 toe, 2 dreams. It began with Edric, the slightly damp, who ventured into a snowstorm in search of rogue chickens. Upon his return, villagers gasped not at his bravery, but at his missing left pinky toe, now presumed devoured by cold spirits or rebellious soup. Rather than mourn, Edric claimed, "My toe left to seek destiny. I remain but a humble footman." He wrapped the gap in cabbage and pride, and from that chilly absence, a legend ignited, the rise of Surtot. By spring, Edric's missing digit had evolved into Surtot, a noble soul banished by frost, now questing through snowfields to bring warmth and justice. Children chanted songs. Surtot rides swift on blizzard's breath, dodging rats, defying death. Elders embroidered tailies. Surtot, fighting the great sock-kraken. Surtot crafting fire from disappointment. Surtot marrying a mitten named Gloriana and fathering 5 emotionally balanced bunions. Toe worship and tiny shrines. Peasants built toe shrines, small piles of hay topped with turnip crowns, where they whispered wishes of warmth and wiggle. Offerings included sheep-shaped soap, bread shaped like regret, wool snippets tied in knots of longing. One villager claimed their frostbite healed after reciting the oath of the sole survivor. "May my toes remain intact, though my dreams may peel and crack." The cult of frostbitten nobility over time. Other lost toes gained titles. Lady Heelish, who vanished mysteriously during a particularly aggressive barn nap. The twin tips of Terence, pinkies lost in a duel over butter. Count Crinkle, a middle toe that rebelled mid-sprint and joined the turnip resistance. Followers believe that every toe lost in noble suffering became part of the Tento Council, advising Surtot in frostbitten eternity. The Toe Codex, Slumberthorpe scribes compiled Toll folklore into the Codex of Chill Appendages, a half-burned manuscript containing winter strategies, warnings against licking icicles for courage. Limericks like, "This text was guarded by the village's eldest toe survivor, Grandma, who wore 10 knitted rings and predicted snow by humming." Annual reenactments. Toe theater every winter. Villagers performed the Toe tragedy pageant, retelling Surtot's heroic acts, his battle with the draft demon, his speech to the cold wall of regret, his final duel against the sock with no soul. Roles rotated annually. The village cow once played Reviews were mixed. In the wintry whisper of Slumberthorpe, where breath fogged the air like failed promises. Romance was not fueled by grand gestures or eloquent declarations, it was cabbage. Specifically, offering someone your warmest cabbage leaf was considered the highest form of love confession. When temperatures dropped, so did emotional walls. Peasants sought companionship not just for snuggles, but for shared soup dreams and dual blanket strategy. Cabbage. The vegetable of affection. Cabbage wasn't just dinner, it was a symbol. Presenting one's best cabbage meant, "I admire your layering technique. I see a future where our pigs share shelter. Let us write songs together about moderately warm stew." The boldest gesture was the steamed proposal where a cabbage was hollowed, filled with hay and poetry, and buried slightly outside the beloved's hut, marked with 3 solemn turnips. Flirtation in a frosty language with frozen lips and a lack of viable eyeliner. Peasants invented subtle cues for courtship. A shared spoon meant commitment. Reheating someone's gruel whispered devotion. Holding hands through wool gloves was practically marriage. Pickup lines of the era included: "Your blanket technique dishonors the gods of comfort. Do you come here often to whisper timbers? I'd trade my last toe to warm beside your goat." If the person blushed, they were either flattered or deeply cold. Blanket sharing and the 7-day snuggle pact. True love was sealed via the snuggle pacta. Whispered agreement too. Share hay bedding for 7 nights. Sing lullabies in unison. Defend each other's toes in communal sleep formations. Breaking the pact was scandalous. One peasant pair, caught sneaking extra blanket corners, was fined in emotional cabbage. Gifts of courtship, woolen tokens, and sincere turnips. Romantic gifts included wool scraps shaped into tiny foot cloaks, turnips carved like disappointing portraits, poems titled Ode to Your Heat Radius. One bold suitor serenaded his beloved with the infamous ballad I Dream of Hay and You, which caused 3 marriages and 1 suspicious barn fire. Winter weddings, ceremony of sniffles and mutual regret weddings were brief, mostly because noses froze mid-vow. Traditions included exchanging steaming turnips, signing the blanket treaty, promising fair warmth forever, the goat judge nodding with approval. Feasts involved imaginary food, emotional soup, and the couple dancing atop the least creaky portion of the floor. When warmth crossed the moral line, and peasants asked, "Is that blanket breathing?" In the cruel winter of 1276, when frost hung in the air like passive-aggressive mist and cows refused to moo out of spite, Slumberthorpe faced a dilemma: heat or honor. The population, already burdened by cabbage courtships and frostbitten toes, now grappled with a new warmth scandal: rat blankets. The rise of the rodent quilt. It started with Barnaby the Bodish, an eccentric peasant known for sleeping under unstable furniture and dreaming in riddles. One frigid night, he trapped a family of field rats beneath a thin weave of hay and woven regret. The rodents, seeking shelter and possibly therapy, nestled into the layers, and thus the rat blanket was born. Barnaby claimed, "Their warmth is communal, their judgment minimal." Soon, copycats emerged. Rat nests were rebranded as living blankets. Some argued it wasn't exploitation, it was cozy diplomacy. Ethical debates and furious whisperings, not everyone approved. The Anti-Rodent Wrapping League emerged, waving banners stitched with nitrogen monoxide whiskers in bed. They claimed rat blankets were a violation of vermin rights, likely to whisper secrets during sleep. Just plain creepy. Villagers were torn. Was this just advanced snuggling or a fuzzy betrayal of peasant dignity? One dramatic town hall saw a rat named Philip give a speech from inside a sock. It ended with 3 people changing sides, one fainting and Philip being offered honorary citizenship. Rat blanket engineering. Rat blankets varied in design. Passive snuggle net. Rats wandered freely within wool pockets. Whisker grit. Structured fur zones assigned by tail length. The hay squeak pile. 14 rats, 2 turnips, and a polite goat. Maintenance required regular apologies, cheese offerings, and emotional If a rat felt neglected, it might relocate mid-sleep or chew through the love poem under your pillow. Underground rat blanket markets soon. Black market rat blankets emerged. Purebred warmth rats sold by whispery vendors. Designer hay nests with rat-sized foot cloaks. Luxury squeak linens woven with gilt and moss. Peasants traded cabbages, songs, and 1/3 of their blanket corners for premium models. Smuggling rats in spoons became a trend. One family was caught hiding 6 rats inside a hollowed-out soup ladle. Protests and the Great Blanket Purge eventually. Tensions snapped. A group of blanket purists staged the Great Unfurring, casting rats from bedding and shouting, "We shall freeze with dignity." The rats, upset but organized, held a counter-protest. They built tiny hay effigies and squeaked rhythmically. Negotiations ensued. It was agreed rats could remain as thermal guests, not bedding accessories. Any blanket with more than 5 rats must have consent signatures. Rats must be given nightly lullabies and tiny knitted hats. When shivering became ritual and the blizzard had feelings in Slumberthorpe, where frost didn't knock, but simply moved in and criticized the furniture. Warmth was often not found by fire, but by fear. Peasants, lacking proper insulation and basic optimism, turned to tales and terrors to trick the body into feeling anything at all. By nightfall, huts became theaters of superstition. Each creak a cursed whisper, each icy gust a ghost with unresolved issues. The snow spirits. Frost with personality. The cold wasn't weather, it was sentient pet. Snow spirits were categorized by mood. Wimplow, the whispering chill, haunted pillows and aired. Passive-aggressive comments during dinner. Shebin, the nose nipper, delighted in stealing warmth from nasal tips and relationship trust. Crack, the toe judge, determined who deserved frostbite based on bedtime fashion choices. To avoid angering them, peasants left gifts. Boiled onion peels, arranged like apologies. Fragments of hay scribbled with compliments. A single sock filled with hope. Bedtime warnings and grandma's scare songs. Every peasant child grew up hearing the frost tales, lullabies designed to scare warmth into their bones. Hushna, child, the chillman creeps. He counts your toes while mama sleeps. And if you snore too loud tonight, he'll knit your dreams from frozen spite. Grandma sang these songs with tender menace. If a child survived the lullaby, they were considered emotionally resilient and possibly clairvoyant. Ghosts in the goat shed. Goats, being slightly magical, often served as cold detectors. If they stood very still and made eye contact, it meant a snow spirit was near, or they were just contemplating taxes. Peasants held goat seances, where everyone gathered around a goat and waited for it to sneeze. The direction of the sneeze predicted the night's temperature and likelihood of spiritual sarcasm. Rituals of fear-based heat generation when blankets failed and fires betrayed. Peasants turned to fear rituals, candle staring contests, until paranoia sparked cheek warmth. The shiver dance, rhythmic trembling to confuse spirits and generate accidental warmth. The silent screech. One villager let out a dramatic yell every hour to remind the frost they were watching. Some claimed fear caused the body to heat out of spite. Others just liked drama. Village theater, performing the cold. To keep spirits entertained, villagers performed annual plays, titled things like The Blanket That Lied, Frostbite, A Love Story. Ghost soup and emotional snow rolls included. The betrayed bedpost Nam, the gallant Lady Shiva of the Hay Realm snow spirit, presumably invisible and snobbish, judged performances based on wig layering and dramatic whimper quality. The ice mirror and self-warming delusion, one popular tool. The ice mirror, a reflective chunk kept in homes so peasants could whisper affirmations like, "I am not frozen, I am misunderstood. My cheeks are red with passion, not hypothermia. Sir Toe watches over me." Psychological warmth was debated. One peasant claimed to sweat slightly after complimenting himself for 16 minutes, where Moshe was suspicious and victory measured in breaths in the unforgiving chill of Slumberthorpe's endless winter. The villagers discovered something peculiar. Moving made things colder, and thus, out of pure frost-induced laziness and strategic despair, they birthed the greatest sporting tradition the village had ever seen, the Peasant Olympics, Stillness Edition. Movement was declared a menace, efficiency a myth, the goal remain unmoved, unbothered, and questionably conscious for as long as physically tolerable. The rules of the games. The competition had few rules but many dramatic pauses. Each participant chose a hay pile or awkward seating log, declared a lack of ambition, promised not to wiggle, fidget, or engage in existential debate. Points were deducted for unintentional sneezes, attempted blinking in rhythm, sudden emotional growth. Judges, usually goats, wearing ceremonial frowns, monitored the games with skeptical mowing. Categories of competition. The games were divided into 5 stillness disciplines. The Huth Hover. Peasants stood near a fire without flinching, even when sparks plotted rebellion. Blanket burial. Competitors wrapped themselves so thoroughly in bedding that they resembled contemplative cabbages. The Spoon Sit. A single spoon placed under one buttock. Shift, and you're out. Goat Gaze Off. Maintain eye contact with a goat. Lose focus. Lose warmth. Foot discipline. No toe may twitch. If it does, you must recite the sorrow of socks aloud. Legendary athletes of immobility. Many peasants became local heroes by excelling at non-existence. Barnabas the Unshakable, who once remained motionless for 9 days. His victory speech was a single sigh. Elka of the Stiff Elbow, who took silver after staring at a stew pot until the stew apologized. Timmy, the mysterious lump, later discovered to be a coat on a bucket but still honored. Stories spread of champions who moved so little they were mistaken for ancestral furniture. One even accrued moss. Training regimens' stillness required rigorous untraining. Common methods included reading books titled Why Walk, practicing meditation beneath increasingly judgmental pretending to be soup. Villagers encouraged competitive napping, though records were disputed due to dream interference. Closing ceremony. The Yon parade at the end of every Olympics. Peasants gathered in synchronized immobility. Lullabies were hummed by crows. Turnips were thrown symbolically. The goat judges announced winners by standing slightly nearer to them than usual. The anthem was sung. We moved not, nor thought a thought, through winter's spite and foot that fought. In hay we lay, proud and pale. We are the sloths of Slumber Vale. Everyone clapped internally. In Slumberthorpe, winter sleep didn't just require blankets and desperate layering. It demanded music. Peasants believed sound could soften ice, coax warmth from reluctant fireplaces, and lull restless feet into surrender. Thus emerged a strange genre, Thor songs, sung not for entertainment, but survival. Each melody was part spell, part therapy, part awkward communal hum. The lullaby of wool. The most beloved lullaby was soft, not sorry, a tune believed to make blankets fluffier and hay less judgmental. Wool and whispers. Tuck me tight, hide me from the biting night. May my socks not break or flee, and may rats sing sweetly to me. It was sung in three-part harmony. One person croaked. One person hummed through a spoon. One goat contributed emotional back. Groups singing and mattress mood boosting before sleep. Households gathered in pile formation and performed nightly Thor songs. The purpose? Distract the frost, emotionally bond with pillows, express grievances through rhyme. Popular songs included My Blanket is a Liar, I Dream of Soup, But It Refuses Me, Turnip Tango in G minor. Each song ended with someone weeping gently into the mattress corner. That was considered applause. Instruments of despair peasants played. Soot harps, ribs of rats strung with regret. Hay flutes, twigs whittled poorly. The emotional spoon banged gently on skulls, depending on rhythm and emotional need. One ambitious villager attempted bagpipes made from cabbage. The sound was described as romantic agony and was banned during dinner. Competitive singing. The ballad brawl every winter. Villagers held the Frost Harmony Festival, a contest where families sang Thor songs to determine who could summon the warmest dream. Judges scored performers on lyric ambiguity, blanket choreography, convincing use of foot metaphors. Winning families earned extra hay and permission to sleep near the emotionally available sheep. Forbidden songs and the Ballad of the Lost Sock. Some songs were banned for being too powerful, including The Ashes Whisper Secrets, caused spontaneous foot warmth and existential panic. Gloriana's Mitten, believed to summon ghostly warmth and romantic illusions. The most feared tune was Sock of the South Wind, a lullaby about a sock that betrayed its wearer. No one sings it now, except the rats. Personal lullabies. Heartbeats in hay, each peasant secretly composed their own bedtime chant. Some scrawled lyrics on blanket scraps. Others whispered lines to invisible frost guardians. One famous lullaby. Blanket beast, hold me close. I've given up. I've peeled my hopes. Dream me warm. Don't tease my toes, and hide me when the blizzard blows. These personal songs were never shared except during dreams, or by deeply sentimental goats. Every winter, as frost-coated turnips and fireplaces hissed like judgmental cats, the villagers of Slumber, Thorpe and Gristlewick set aside petty squabbles for a tradition more noble, the annual pig warm-off. The goal was simple: find the warmest pig in the realm, measure its snuggle-to-zell ratio, and declare a victor. The stakes: glory, pride, and first pick of communal hay-bunders. The science of swine warmth. Peasants believed pigs retained ancestral fire. Their rotund forms, seasoned by emotion and barn naps, were considered natural furnaces. Some even whispered pigs were born when woolen soup had a love affair. Warmth measurements were extremely precise. Insert one hand beneath pig belly. If fingers sweat, bonus points. Count the pig's snores per minute. Fewer snores equals better insulation. Rate the emotional comfort level of snuggling. 1 to 5. Each pig was given a temporary title: Sir Cecil, Dame Rostella, or Count Heatbeard. Preparation and pampering Compedian pigs were treated like royalty, bathed in onion broth, massaged with grated beef, read bedtime sonnets to enhance dream heat retention. Slumber Thorpe's finest contender, Bumbo the Radiant, was known for sleeping in a circle and emanating passive optimism. Gristlewick's champion, Sunogor the Steam Golem, was rumored to warm haze simply by thinking fondly of summer. Contest day, sweaty, spectacle. Villagers gathered in coats made of layered disappointment. The pigs were unveiled amid trumpet snorts and ceremonial squealing. Events included the blanket test, pigs covered in hay quilts, warmth assessed by volunteers willing to weep with joy, snuggled trials. Brave peasants nestled beside pigs while narrating emotional backstories. Steam reveal ceremony. Pigs encouraged to sigh deeply. Visible mist equals victory aura. The goat referee made judgment noises that were later translated by a child with mild psychic ability. Scandal, sabotage, and the Great Snout Swap in 1276. Chaos erupted when Gristlewick was accused of snout inflation, stuffing their pig-ass nostrils with spicy moss to increase thermal flow. The move backfired when the pig sneezed dramatically, launched a spoon across the village, and refused to participate unless apologized to via interpretive dance. A temporary truce was negotiated using turnip diplomacy. Pig poetry and post-competition reverence after the contest. Pigs were serenaded with verse, Old Bumbo, soft belly of fate. You warmed the night, you snored so great. Let no frost find your noble flank, for you, our love, will never blank. Pigs returned to their huts with new hay thrones. Villagers kissed their noses, and warmth was celebrated as a spiritual achievement. Once the pigs were measured and serenaded, and the snout scandals diplomatically buried beneath celebratory moss, the villagers of Slumber Thorpe and Gristlewick returned for part 2 of their frost season revelries. The winter games and by-games. They meant a tournament so chaotic it made chess look like salad. Origins of rock paper Legend says the game was invented during a blizzard when a bard, a turnip hoarder, and a sleepwalking goat tried to settle a dispute over soup rights using hand gestures and small logs. Thus emerged a trilogy of symbols. Rock, symbol of stubbornness and poorly made bread. Paper represents bureaucracy, passive aggression, and apology letters. Firewood, ultimate power, burns rock, smothers paper, and is hoarded like emotional intimacy. It's said firewood beats everything except unresolved trauma. Tournament rules players wear ceremonial hats shaped like mild confusion. Macaws are refereed by the official goose, who honks for decisions and occasionally pecks a player to reset momentum. Points are awarded for gestures, emotional flair, and convincing impersonations of melancholy. The final round is often delayed due to existential debates over whether firewood is just metaphorical grief. Notable victories and strategic genius in 1302. Elspeth, the slightly damp, defeated 16 opponents using only paper. Each sheet contained love notes and debt reminders. In 1321, 2 peasants tied after both selected rock and then married for tax benefits. In the fabled foreground of 1340, a player conjured actual firewood by sobbing near a tree until it emotionally gave in. Emotional fallout and closing ceremonies. No matter the outcome, participants gather at the Great Blanket of Reflection, an itchy tapestry where winners whisper gratitude and losers are gently tickled with feathers of forgiveness. Final anthem sung in monotone. We came, we gestured, we burned some things. Winter hugged us with icy wings. The rock, the paper, the splintered wood, a season's battle misunderstood. Then everyone eats soup, no matter who won. Long ago, peasants marked seasons by the behaviors of livestock. If a goat wore a shawl, winter. If the pigs began composing sonnets about mud, spring. But one frosty afternoon, old Farnsworth tripped on a wheel of moldy cheese, fell into a ditch, and woke up declaring it Wednesday, and thus began the age of calendrical revelation, the emergence of the calendar scroll, using scraps of bark, breadcrumbs, and vague optimism. Villagers assembled a proto-calendar, day names derived from moods, months themed around chores, holidays based on accidents. Scholars began interpreting weather patterns as emotional messages from the great clock underneath reality. Cult formation, the Tick Whisperers. As the calendar took hold, a sect emerged, the Tick Whisperers, spiritual keepers of time's invisible heartbeat. They wore robes made of leaf piles and spoke only in their main duties: declare each week's mood, hold midnight assemblies to chant the names of days in reverse, maintain the sacred sundial, which was actually just a goat that refused to move at night. Their leader, Crono Elspeth, claimed she could hear Mondays arguing with Thursdays. Rituals and beliefs, time offerings. Villagers donated spare seconds by standing still and reminiscing. Chrono cakes, baked with expired yeast in existential confusion. The festival of adjustment, celebrated whenever someone got the date wrong. And most shockingly, Tuesdays became holy, because every bad decision apparently happened on a Tuesday. It was both revered and feared. No one wore socks. Calendar conflicts and the Great Day Swap. In 1304, a schism erupted when rival cult, the Wednesday Revisionists, claimed Tuesdays were a myth, arguing they were just a long Monday hallucination. Chaos followed. Villagers began double-counting Fridays. The Tick Whisperers retaliated by adding a 9th day to the week Yester Blurt. A debate ensued for 72 hours over which month Beetroot should emotionally peak. Eventually, peace returned when someone sneezed at the sacred goat, and it finally moved, signaling spring. Legacy of time worship. Though the cult waned, the calendar remained. To this day, peasants consult turnips before making appointments. Children chant days backward before bed. The extra day box is kept in every cottage, a mysterious drawer filled with old buttons and unsent apologies. And every Tuesday, everyone collectively sighs, just in case. After time itself was catalogued and worshipped through goat-based rituals and calendrical grief, the villages of Slumberthorpe and Gristlewick found themselves embroiled in trade disputes, blanket encroachments, and the great scandal of unauthorized hay fluffing. War loomed. But before pitchforks were sharpened, one brave elder proposed a radical solution: soup diplomacy. Origins of ladle-based peacemaking. It began in 1299 when two siblings, feuding over turnip inheritance, shared a bowl of regret stew. By the time they hit the bottom of the bowl, they had embraced, wept, and jointly purchased a goat. The legends spread. Broth could bind, bisque could broker, and chowder could champion compromise. Thus, the first soup summit was held in a barn lit only by sadness and a gently boiling cauldron. The formal soup diplomacy ritual each diplomatic party brought. One soup recipe symbolizing their village's emotional priorities. One ladle carved from materials representing their grief history. One speech delivered while holding a spoon to their own ear for introspection. Negotiations involved. Mutual soup stirring. Both parties stirred each other's soup while sharing mildly traumatic childhood tales. Temperature test. If one soup was warmer, the other party agreed to more generous trade terms. Slurp ceremony. Loud, communal, slurping, honored truth, and broth thickness, transparency. Famous soups and their meanings. Soup name, ingredients, symbolism. Neutral broth. Water, vague emotion. Celery leaf, desire for peaceful ambiguity. Bitter pea, confession peas. Confessions, weeping herbs. Atonement, introspective guilt. Triumph, bisque pumpkin. Victory crumbs, political ascension via stew. The forgotten soup, unnamed. No one remembers. Denial and reconciliation, conflict, resolution through ladle gestures. Diplomatic language became slow clockwise stir equals we are considering forgiveness. Fast, anti-clockwise whip equals apologize or face broth exile. Holding ladle upright like a torch equals we demand extra cabbage. In 1315, peace was declared when both villages simultaneously stirred mutual root vegetable trust. A stew so sincere it made a goat cry. Closing ceremony in communal negotiators wrapped ladles in yarn and paraded through fields reciting, "Let broth bury bitterness. Let parsley patch the past. May we sip without suspicion. May our soup last at last." Villagers feasted. Disputes dissolved into carrots. Even the moon sighed and looked warmer. In Slumberthorpe, there existed a blanket unlike any other. The remembering quilt, sewn by generations who stitched grief, joy, and the occasional lasagna recipe into its fibers. It was both beloved and feared. Each patch held memory, and one day it started sharing them back. Origins of the sentient quilt, crafted from fragments of old tunics, exiled socks, and political protest ribbons. The quilt was initially seen as a comfort object. It lived in the central hearth, and peasants often napped beneath it, whispering secrets like, "I stole elderberry jam from the festival. My goat and I practiced synchronized blinking. Sometimes I dream I'm a turnip." Unbeknownst to all, the quilt absorbed every word, and one fateful frost moon it began, narrating blanket confessions. The whispering nights villagers awoke too, rustling fabric announcing a fete, embroidered letters spelling borrowed sock never returned, unfolding threads forming portraits of emotionally compromised peasants. It remembered everything. The crumb theft of 1295, the unintentional goose gaslighting of 1303, the hay misdirection prank war of 1311. Peasants panicked. "It's just embroidery," they yelled. As the blanket murmured, "You kissed a turnip and liked it." Social unraveling and blanket banishment. Council of Elders met wearing hats made from denial. Debates boiled. Burn the quilt. Bury it in the field of unspoken regrets. Use it for a truth-themed picnic. Ultimately, they voted for exile by folding. The blanket was gently folded into a rectangle of shame and placed atop the mountain of misremembered feelings. Some say it still whispers up there, mainly recipes and dramatic sighs. Blanket, legacy, and emotional quilting in the aftermath. Villagers stitched emotionless blankets for safety, perturned only with abstract sadness. The art of silence quilting was born, each stitch accompanied by awkward eye contact and denial. A monument was raised, the patch of forgiveness, where peasants now lie quietly and pretend memories are made of soup. And still, every winter, the wind sounds just slightly like a blanket saying, "Remember when you lied about soup?" In the melancholy village of Gristlewick, still recovering from blanket betrayals and soup-based diplomacy, emotions ran high but were seldom admitted. So naturally, the townsfolk invented a festival to cope with their expressive restraint. The festival of emotionally distant candles. Each candle, once lit, was meant to symbolize a feeling no one wanted to acknowledge, like mild guilt over soggy turnips, unexplained envy of a particularly attractive goat, love expressed only via hay placement candle, casting ritual before the festival. Peasants carved their feelings into wax molds, often labeled, "I'm fine, thanks." It's not jealousy, it's turnip admiration. I said I'm over it. These candles were then dipped in awkward beeswax, hardened by passive sighs, and sprinkled with peppermint and aisle flakes. Each wick was braided while the braider confessed one mild regret, usually involving cabbage. Lighting ceremony. The quiet blaze at sunset. Villagers gathered around the flame of ambivalence, an eternal torch that glowed slightly disappointed. One by one, candles were lit. Too quickly, a sign of emotional panic, with prolonged hesitation, indicating buried romantic hair-related tension. Upside down, either rebellion or confusion about metaphors. No one made direct eye contact with their flames. Instead, they gazed at their neighbor's candle and nodded subtly, as if saying, "I see your unspoken loneliness." Symbolic candle types. Candle names sent emotional meaning. The wilted turnip. Faint sadness plus compost, lost opportunities, and misunderstood gardens. Goat's approval hay, an ego desperate need for validation. Spoon memory, metallic regret in time, unresolved intimacy. Cabbage, confession, leafy grief and apology, root backhanded remorse. Each candle was rated by flicker intensity, and whether it made a passing widow sigh loudly. The closing procession. Finally, peasants paraded with their candles along Regret Lane, humming the anthem. Flicker with me, avoid the heat, we feel some things, but never repeat. Melt me gently, wax me shy, let my feelings slowly die. Then, candles were floated down the river of unsent letters and watched vanish. Someone sneezed, and the moment dissolved. One hoof's journey from barnyard to expressionism. His name was Thistle Crump. Born into modest straw and casual bleating, he stood out early, not for his milk, nor his head-butting prowess, but for his movement. When other goats frolicked, Thistle Crump glided. He moonwalked across mud. He tangled with turnips. He just hoofed through thunder. Naturally, the villagers were confused. "He's possessed," shouted Elderflap. "He's possessed by rhythm," whispered Elspeth. The awakening. Dance's destiny. It began during the soup fog rehearsal of 1320, when Thistle Crump accidentally spun in a circle while sneezing, flopped sideways into hay, and struck a pose so emotionally raw that 3 peasants cried and one re-evaluated his marriage. From then on, the The goat danced in rainstorms, cabbage festivals near soup. A local bard described his style as like philosophy. If it wore mittens and hoof polish, training and rejection, Thistle Crump trained hard, practiced twirls on slippery moss, meditated near dramatic trees, read scrolls on angsty motion theory. But society was cruel. The village council declared goats should not emote unless it's about food. So Thistle Crump was banned from barns after pirouetting through a hay ledger, causing confusion about inventory and feelings. Still, he danced, the performance that changed everything during the Festival of Regretful Lanterns. Thistle Crump stole the stage, performed the bleat of becoming a solo piece in which he portrayed identity confusion using interpretive bleating and slow ended with a dramatic roll into a pile of emotional laundry. The silence was long. Then came thunderous applause, and one screamed that may have been joy or indigestion. From that moment on, he was known not just as a goat, but as Thistle Crump, the expressive legacy of the dancing goat. A barn was converted into a theatre. Straw seats only. Peasants started taking emotion via elbow classes. The Turnip Orchestra was formed to accompany future who fled performances. School children now ask, what would Thistle Crump twirl to? He became a symbol of unapologetic absurdity, of hoof-powered hope, and of choosing choreography over conformity. The peasants of Slumber, Thorpe and Gristlewick, having measured warmth in pigs, traded apologies through broth, stitched scandal into cloth, and twirled with goats through emotional fog, now returned to quietude. The soup cauldron simmers, but slower now. The sentient quilt snoozes under moonlight, humming lullabies made of old gossip. And somewhere on a mossy hill, Thistle Crump, the expressive, practices one last pirouette, not for an audience, but for memory. Villagers speak in whispers now, not out of fear or embarrassment, but reverence. They've seen absurdity become truth, and grief become choreography. Every emotional vegetable and emotionally burdened barn has taught them something. That warmth isn't just temperature, it's shared nonsense. That story stitched with humor thread deeper than logic. And that goats, blankets, and soup can broker peace better than any sword. No wars, no endings, just seasonal sighs, gentle snorts, and the kind of love you only express through uncomfortable candles. So if you ever visit Gristlewick on a moody Tuesday, knock gently. Someone might hand you a ladle, ask your blanket's opinion, or invite you to dance your regrets in hoofprint form, because the saga never truly ends. It only snuggles into folklore.